we've got someone else who's coming to grace the occasion. Sam Adesoga. Sam, well, where can I start from? Grace, you know, you've just, what you've tapped into, I'm sure Sam is going to also tap into some of that narrative as well. I've done some work with Sam. We've been doing some work together. We met in the UK. We've been online with each other for years. And, we did some work together in the UK. We've done some work together in Ghana. Sam has been to Ghana twice. And, your take on stuff, on Agile, Scrum, and your African approach to dealing with some very complex situations, your practical African approach. I think that, there's a lot here that we can bring together. So Sam, professional Scrum Master, you're into Agile, and I won't say consultant because I think you're beyond consultant. There's so much to you as a practitioner and the things you've been able to pull together. Sam, I've seen you work and I've seen the way you carry yourself. You're truly an ambassador for agility. It's just so natural, so natural. So thank you so much for connecting with us and for joining us on the platform. And we're really looking forward to your presentation. Because we're short on time, I'm not going to do any 5-minute introduction. I'm going to cut it short here and let Sam speak to the topic and speak for himself. Sam, welcome on board.
Right. Thank you, Nana. Thank you. And I'm glad to be here. Nana, thank you for inviting me again. And I'm hoping we can learn, share some knowledge together. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, very clear.
We need to make these conferences back in person. To be honest.
Yes, next year, Sam. I'm looking for sponsorship. So please, anyone who's listening, we're looking for sponsorship. All we need is a hall and just some basic equipment. So we have to do face-to-face. We have to.
Yes. So, I always like to see faces, get the energy from the room, but I've done enough rehearsals to do this, so we're good. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon, morning, whatever you're joining from.
Thank you.
So I got the topic right around turbulent times, and it took me a while actually to find out, okay, what do I want to talk about? And I thought, let's kind of demystify Scrum, okay, and talk about how can we deal, or how does Scrum really, the principles in Scrum help us deal with uncertainty and unpredictability. These are some of the traits we see in turbulent times. I'm not going to go back into that. I'm just going to say this, Lord. Agile is a mindset for me, and there are so many frameworks, that have been, put together by a lot of people. And while these frameworks are important, right, they help us get started quicker. I'll talk about that in a little bit. I think for me, it's more about the mindset. Okay, once we can focus on helping organizations, teams, individuals build the mindset, then the frameworks will fall in place, right? We wouldn't struggle why you want to do a daily Scrum or why planning, But the mindset for me is what I tend to focus on, and that's the interest of my heart. Okay. I thought, let me look online to figure out. We talk about turbulent times, and we know globally around the world right now, there are talks of recession, inflation at record highs. I'm not going to go back into that. I thought, let me look at locally in Africa, what are we seeing? And I saw this article about very, very recent multi-choice, like DSTV and pay TV in Africa, facing turbulent times. And this is linked to the fact that internet is getting cheaper, right? The penetration of internet in Africa is improving. And that means I don't have to pay for expensive subscription. People are now able to watch stuff on their phone. You choose when you want to subscribe, and the plans are getting cheaper. So these guys are saying stuff like subscriber rate dropping, affecting their revenue. That's turbulent. That's a challenge that facing an African organization. Another one which has been talked about is immigration out of Africa. I know Nigeria is seeing high levels of immigration out of Africa. Young people, we say Africa has got, is it 75% now of young population? But a lot of these guys are living, it reminds me of what we read in the 80s. I was still very young then. But it's like people are living organizations. I read of an article in Nigeria where an entire department resigned around the same time. How does the organization cope? So these are the issues that are facing, some of the issues that are facing, African organization. And I thought about this, thinking, historically, look at what happens when the economy is tough, inflation is high. What companies tend to traditionally do is almost stop and freeze, cost cutting. What can we do? But then I saw an article which was written by Deloitte, and this is what I want to talk about a little bit here. And what we see, what this article tends to explain to us is when we are in this kind of situation, for the companies that have survived, what they tap into is growth, right? Which is, and if you look into this, in this graph that is on the right-hand side, you can see you start from what can you do to retain or grow your current customers, acquiring new customers, optimizing price, enhancing your products and services. But where a lot of the value comes from is creating new businesses, new products. What are the new ways in which your customers want to use your product? And if you look on that graph, we move from certainty, the ways the companies already work today, to new dimensions where there is a lot of uncertainty. And that's what innovation is. It's about finding new ways of doing things. I mean, in Nigeria, for instance, there's a lot of money being thrown into fintech. These companies are actually challenging banks. I don't want to call names here now, but these new banks, right, are actually challenging the older banks. And what do we see? It's a lot easier to get things done. You don't have to go to a bank now to interact in your account. You don't have to open, in the UK, for instance, I recently opened an account where I didn't have to go to a bank. All the verification was done on the phone. And this is what's really happening, which means the current ways of working this organization isn't going to carry them into the new ways of working. And that is where we now start talking about alternative ways of working. And that's what Agile is for me. When people ask me, what is Agile to you? It's around exploring those alternative ways of working that would help an organization transition from working in that certain, predictable, to this new terrain. We call it the complex domain, where there are more unknowns than knowns. And what I've tried to do in this talk is go through some key 3 areas that I see that the Agile frameworks help us. So I'm not going to be talking about Scrum, but taking 3 areas of wisdom, if I can, that I can group all these practices into. All right. So before we go into that, let's talk about Scrum, because my topic was demystifying Scrum, right? We define Scrum to be a lightweight framework that helps people, organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. That is what Scrum is. Okay. And I wanted to say to you guys, right, that Scrum is a fantastic framework. But if you really, really look into the framework, there's nothing new in Scrum. There are events. It defines 3 roles. It defines events are meetings that we have already, right? 3 roles, define 5 values: courage, commitment, openness, respect, focus. We know these things. But why is a framework like Scrum so powerful? Is that it packages these ideas for you. Okay, because together they work well. So, and I went to look at the definition of what a framework is really. It is a set of rules, ideas, beliefs that you use to deal with problems or to decide on how to deal with problems. That's why it works. On its own, the practices are not new. Scrum didn't create them. But what they did was bring meetings together, bring accountabilities in there, put together artifacts. What are the commitments for those artifacts? And that's why it works in the way it's been put together. And one thing that I got reminded of for anyone that is a developer, I remember years ago when I used to be a developer, we used to have web frameworks. Those web frameworks were not new. They were, how do you deal with database? How do we deal with your UI? How do you deal with, and it put it together such that you can build a functional app within a couple of days. And that is what a framework like Scrum gives you. Instead of having to go figure out yourself, what should our sprint be? What events do we need? It gives you a set of ideas that you can take and implement. Okay, so I thought I'd just drop that very quickly. Now let's go to these three groups, right? The first one is to deal with turbulent times, deal with uncertainty, complexity. The first one I would take directly out of Scrum is empiricism, which is learning by experimentation, right? And there are really three pillars in there: transparency, inspection, adaptation. Transparency, shared understanding, getting to that state where within your teams, in organizations, with your stakeholders, with your customers, having that shared understanding. An inspection, set of practices that allow you to compare the outcomes you've got to your desired outcomes. And when there are deviations, we adapt. Okay, so let's look through some of these 6 topics under this empiricism. The first one is organizations now need to start figuring out ways to satisfy the customers through early working prototype of their products. What this means is that you haven't got 2 years to release that first version of your product. All right, you want fast feedback from your customers, your users. So as an organization, we want to ensure that we are structured in a way that we can deliver very quickly to the customers, to explore that new need. Is there really a market in there? Have we created in a product in the way the users want to use it? And based on the feedback that you get, you iterate on that product. All right, you continue to iterate. And what does that really mean is that we need to figure out and be more intentional how to get feedback from customers. And there are largely 2 ways, either by surveys, getting customer feedback, or building analytics into your tool that let you know how users are using your product. All right, the next one is, I've heard a lot about scope. I always tell people there is nothing like scope. Your product backlog is a living artifact. Trying to put a scope around your backlog of ideas doesn't make sense. Because if you agree that the market will change, there will be competition, the way users will engage with your product will change, then you must be able to accept that your backlog would have to keep evolving. Okay, I will talk about focus on how to keep this, in some form of scope on the next slide or the one after that. Okay, then feedback. We've talked about getting feedback on the product itself. What I want to talk about next is feedback on the actual ways of working. Remember, these are individuals working in this complex environment. And the process of forming a team, forming, storming, norming, performing, the whole lot, right? It takes time. So it's important to have mechanism of getting feedback on how we work together. Yeah, a lot of the complexities I see actually is not even the product itself, it's people and how you work together, agree, gain consensus to deliver the product. And that's what the sprint retrospective, for instance, in Scrum will do for you. All right, the next one is scale. Now, we've talked about experimentation. The notion of experimentation tells you that some ideas would fail, right? So it is very important to ensure that we keep inspecting. And if there are ideas at all levels of the organization that do not work, then we ditch it and celebrate failure. If your organization is going to take on experimentation, then you must be comfortable with failure. Because in fact, we don't call it failure, we call it learning. What have you learned from what you've done? And that is why it's so important to keep your feedback cycle so short. so that the cost of learning is not greater than the potential benefit of value you get when you do get it right. All right. So this now makes it so important to evolve. Product management, portfolio management, when you have a group of products, it's important to ensure that consistently you're catering for new markets. Some of the work that we do is helping organizations to look at what portion of your budget do you use to maintain old products? And what portion of your budget do you use to invest in new markets, potentially new markets, and do experiments? And you've got to put that in a balance. That is how, as an organization, you would be able to move through turbulent times. If you wait through to the point where the market is turbulent, where there are turbulent times, where there's trouble, you're too late because your competitors are not doing that. I mean, there was a particular page that Google has, I saw this, that lists all the products they've killed over time. Everyone fails. But if you see it as learning and you keep experimenting, then there will be failures with the hope that once you keep getting feedback from your customers, then eventually you get it right. Okay? The next one is self-managing team. I pulled out a quote in one of our PSM slides that I love so much. And it says, not finance, not strategy, not technology. And it is teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage because it's so powerful and so rare. And this quote, I came across this quote about a year ago, and it's really stuck with me. Oftentimes, I don't think that organizations really understand the impact that teamwork makes. And that's my first point. Because you have a group of people reporting to the same manager, sitting around the same desk, doesn't mean you have a team. In fact, I am currently on an engagement right now where they're talking about how can we work better as a team. And what I've found out as a pattern in this organization is they don't have teams. You have a group of people, 5, 6 people, working in silos, everyone focused on a product each. There isn't a goal or a purpose that connects everyone together. And some of the challenges that I'm trying to solve right now is these guys don't want to attend daily Scrum, they don't want to attend sprint planning. And just occurred to me just last week, Friday, that's the reason why. If you're going to pull me into a meeting with 4 other people that we do not share work together, then it's a waste of my time. So in order for us to get to a point where we want to really leverage teams, we need to start bringing our teams together and working on singular things. All right? The next one is, now you've got this team together. We talk a lot about it a lot in Agile teams, which is cross-functional teams. And if you think about that, right? Turbulent times, complex problems, right? You want to release and get feedback as quick as possible. Oftentimes, you find out the team is very nimble. They are building stuff. And then the product is deployed somewhere and is ignored for the next 1 month. Which means before you get feedback on the work you've done, it takes about 2 months or 3 months. In the world that we are in right now, that could be too long, right? And what I usually do is when you start measuring your lead time, right, which is from when a request comes in to when that product is released, how long is it? Then you can start unpicking the areas of the organization where you've got those weights and start bringing those skills into the team. All right? Next one is project to product teams. A lot of organizations try to be agile with project teams. What I find in my observation for most of the organizations is these project teams are almost like feature teams, feature factories, they call them. We just send stuff to them, just do what we're told. And that makes it very difficult for these teams to get feedback from the customer. How do you know that what you're building is what the customer wants? All right? They are not able to talk to the customers and stakeholders directly. And what happens again in project teams, I have found out again in organizations, is when you work on project teams, so a very good developer or a good BA over time has worked on 3-4 projects. What do you see? When that product they worked on 2 years ago has some challenges, oh, go get Sam. He knows this well. Eventually, you see one individual working on 4-5 products, and that affects focus. They're not able, and then that's what leads to what we describe working groups. You now have people that are meant to be in the same team having their own agenda. All right? Next one is leveraging the wisdom in the room. I always tell this story when I'm coaching teams, right? So when the manager or whoever has the loudest voice in the room is the person that always makes decisions. The way I describe it is you are in a plane that has got 4 engines and you turn off all the engines and keep one on. You will struggle. And that for me is a challenge. A lot of the problems that we face in organizations can be solved by just asking the team. One of the things we say in Scrum is take it to the team. I love that. Because there is wisdom in your team. There might be someone in that room that could know the problem to solve that. But because if, as a leader, as a Scrum Master, someone of influence, you do not build a space to leverage the wisdom in the room, then you're going to run on one engine. All right? The next one is motivating people by autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is about not telling people how to get the job done, but you balance that by setting clear goals. In Scrum, we talk about product goal or the sprint goal. The sprint goal allows the Scrum team to be autonomous. Once the goal is clearly articulated, then you can trust the Scrum team to deliver the plan on how to deliver the sprint goal. Recently, I came across a team that was talking about churn and measuring how much work was changing within the sprint. And I had a struggle with that because if the goal is articulated, you leave the team to do whatever they need to do to deliver the goal. Regardless of how they do it, you shouldn't care about that. And that in itself motivates people. Mastery lets people solve complex problems. Challenge them to figure it out and develop their skills. And purpose, this is super important. I'm going to talk about strategy and vision in the next slide, I believe. This is very important. Why is this piece of code I'm writing important? It's very important. So as a leader, you want to articulate purpose. Far too many teams are doing work, but don't understand why they are doing the work. Purpose. And not clear on purpose oftentimes leads to waste. We call it gold plating, right? Days of the next one for me is challenging the team to technical excellence. Okay, technical excellence. This is something as a leader you want to really challenge the team. If you want to go fast, if you want to be able to release, very quickly, give your customers a new feature, a new release every 2 weeks, every 1 month, technical excellence has to be in place. I have never seen a team that is able to release frequently their product to the market without automation. Can you imagine having to release very, very complex products, but you have to test it manually? No. Tech debt. You need to understand and find means of reducing your technical debt in your products if you want to go fast. The process of releasing software should not be one that you're nervous about. It should be something that you do every day. We need to go to production. Yes, great, button, done, gone. But that takes a lot of intentionality to build some infrastructure to allow you to be technical. All right? Right. This is the last one I'm going to talk about. Okay. Which is focus. This is super, super, super important. Right? I've talked about how you can find organizations with teams working on multiple stuff. One thing I figured out at the personal level, organizational level, at different levels, when you focus, you reduce waste. You will always have finite resources, but so many ideas you want to do or you want to implement. All right? And some ideas that we've got here is, first of all, is alignment to organizational strategy. There are practices that we use, like the LPM practices, lean portfolio management, that could help do that. In a framework like Scrum, we've got the product goal, which ties into the vision and overall strategy of the organization. Okay? You have the product goal, and then you have the sprint goal that delivers the product goal over time. All right? That allows the Scrum team, the organization, the stakeholders, everyone to focus per time. All right? Regular feedback and connecting with stakeholders. Far too many teams are running by themselves without involving their stakeholders. How do you know when there's a disconnect? How do you know when the market has moved on? That's why these days we talk so much about product ownership. It is so important. I don't care about the job title, but is there someone that is helping the teams to maximize value? And focused, talking to the market, looking at stakeholders, and ensuring that the work of the Agile teams, the Scrum teams, continues to deliver value. When the teams deviate, we should know. All right? Scrum events, generally events, right? Everyone has meetings. One of the organizations I worked for, we did a survey, and we found out that people were spending 40% of their time in meetings. That was facts, data that we took from Outlook. 40% of their time. And oftentimes people are not engaged in those meetings. What Scrum has done provides 4 or 5 events. Purpose is very clear. What are we trying to do? The daily Scrum is for developers. The sprint planning is very clear who should be there. And Scrum as a framework gives you time boxes. What that really does for you is focus. And one thing I found about human beings is when we're constrained, we know how to use resources effectively. So your daily Scrum is 15 minutes. You focus on impediment, focus on how do you deliver the sprint goal. Done. 15 minutes, we're done. So the events are really meetings. And one thing I must say is that oftentimes when we try to help organizations transition to agile ways of working, one big mistake I see, we introduce this safe Scrum event, for example, if we're doing Scrum, but then these guys have got other meetings that they still attend. That is why people might be pushing back on you. What you should be doing is looking at the meetings that they currently do and see how you can replace them with the Scrum events. All right? One more thing, this is actually something that Kanban talks about a lot, another framework or methodology, I don't know how you put it. It's to stop starting and start finishing. And this is at all levels of the organization. All right? At the exec level, we should know when we've done enough and to stop. At the team level, we should know when we've done enough and deliver. You see, you go to a team board, a Scrum board, right? And you see a developer, one person working on 5 items. I always ask why. How does this work? Is it that you spend each minute or 1 hour on each one? What are you trying to do? And what I have seen is when people focus on fewer things, one, you give your best to those things. And then you can get feedback on those things. In fact, I always imagine a company releasing 5, 6 products to the same customers trying to get feedback. That's confusing, right? In fact, your customers will ask you, which one is it? What's the focus? What's the direction here? So at all levels of the organization, exec level, initiatives, working with a VP once and a VP having about 18 strategic initiatives. We have to ask the question, what is the focus here? Because it's not clear. And that trickles down to the teams. Because when the team is trying to prioritize what to focus on, they don't know. Because from management, they've got 18 things they've got to do. So per time, quarterly planning, whatever it is, ensure that fewer things are being done, closed out before you bring new things in. And we use stuff like WIP limits. And I know it's a Kanban thing. I've successfully used WIP limits exec level on the Kanban board, exec board. In the Scrum board, we've used WIP limits just to help improve effectiveness. And how am I doing for time?
It's actually time up.
Oh, okay. Just give me 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
That's fine.
Sure?
Yeah, 2 minutes is fine. That 2 minutes is fine.
All right. Yeah. All right. Okay. So then the next one is deliver value to your customer at a consistent pace. The customer wants to hear from you regularly. Make it consistent. Talk about predictability. A lot of the processes like estimation, your velocity might help you. You want to ensure you are consistent. You don't want to deliver every 6 months. Every 2 weeks, about 6 months is much better. Okay? Right. So what next? What next? Because sometimes, we talk about these ideas, and what I find is a lot of organizations want to go agile. But where do you start? And the truth is this, right? Different parts of your organization require different things. Scrum is not applicable to everything. And Kanban is not applicable to everything. And I'm going to say this, and there's some things that your project management still works for. But how do you navigate that? Sometimes you engage an agile coach, right? And I will say this for leaders of organizations is to ensure that the goal is clear before you start. What are you trying to achieve for? Don't be agile just because you want to be agile. What is the business problem you want to solve? And then when we work with a coach to help you navigate different options, plan experiments. And too many organizations try to go wide. Please don't do that. Start from one small part of the organization, run a pilot, learn from it, then attempt to scale if you need to. Then get some knowledge, training. There are a lot of organizations right there now that offer training. Please get some training. You don't have to always go recruit a Scrum Master or a product owner. There are people in your organization that have got skills and the context of organization that might be able to pivot to those new accountabilities that are required for Agile to work. I think that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions? And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
My company, yeah. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Sam, you broke that down in such a simple manner. I love the learning by experiment. I love the power of focus. And I love the simplicity of your message as well. You're definitely following the tradition of the first speaker and the second speaker and the third one. And, we're on a roll. So I love your energy. I knew that you definitely want to give this particular topic some justice. You did it some good justice. Thank you so much for that. In the spirit of agility and agile, I think that I am going to do a little swap. Don't go, Sam. I'm going to do a little swap. If Martin is around, I'm going to bring Martin on now because due to the slight delays that we're having and the overrunning time, I think Patricia is in the US and she's launching a new team. And so I think that it's a perfect time. Let me just say something quickly. Right, so just got some news right now. I predicted that the British government is not very agile. And I predicted immediately, that, Liz Truss is going to last maybe 3 months max. She's resigned. So we're hoping that the next government will be a bit more agile and bring all of these wonderful speakers and consultants and trainers and coaches to coach the ministers. and to coach various people in the UK, because that is the shortest government that I've seen in a very, very long time. But I do love the ability to respond and to, well, you know, to try something. And if it was a failed experiment, well, they keep learning and they keep improving. So that's a lesson in governance, you know, that if you can't lead and you feel that your hands are tied, just resign, you know, in good faith and in good spirit, and be a good sport and resign. So I wish the next person well, and I'm hoping that they talk to these wonderful, amazing, agile-minded, you know, consultants and trainers. Maybe they can help them over there. Maybe they can help them. I'm sure they can do something. But you know, I don't know. Sam, have you heard the news? Have you got the news? You're in the UK, right?
Now. I just saw it now. You know.
Yeah. I said she was going to resign. Yeah, and there's well, Robert Benin says resigning is a sign of agility. Oh, and Sam Luttrop says that's what our African leaders don't understand. Well, I think there's leaders in South America, in some parts of Europe and other places who will not resign. You know, so I think there are more countries around the world that need to learn from this, you know. But, you know, I did say that it was a very weak, you know, a very weak selection, because previous to that, experience, you know, experience matters. Experience matters, and the personality as well. You know, the ability to connect with people. So that really matters as well. So for me, you know, I am really excited today because of Agile in Africa. We've come a long way, and I really want to encourage you guys to keep in touch and to connect with some of the speakers. Oh yeah, Zuchi says big boss mentality. Oh, big boss man. Let's see what else is here. You are having a good time. They keep learning and improving. It's much better than the situation we face. So, Sam, it looks like you've provoked, you know, you've provoked some reactions and some feedback. I have a question for you, Sam. Are you still with us? Are you around? Mr. Adesoga. I think maybe he's actually gone for a bio break. So my question basically is, how do you take, maybe Kofi, if you're around, or again, Arthur, how do you take Scrum? How do you take Scrum and make it work in Africa? Who can help me? How do you take Scrum and make it work in Africa? If Scrum is all about self-managing and all of that good stuff.
So Nana, if I may take a stab at that, right? I think, how do we make it work in Africa? I believe it will not be difficult, and I look at it purely from a value perspective. And you know how in Africa we, especially in the areas that I've been, we are quite open. We are very respectful. If you take a Nigerian, a Ghanaian, typically I recall my days in Nigeria, there's certain tribes who will literally bow when they are greeting you, and it still exists no matter how high up, you know, that person is. Right. And then also the kind of courage, you know, that they show. How do we make that work in Africa? I think it's already imbibed in a certain sense in our cultural values and the way we do carry ourselves. What I feel is we probably need to draw it out more and say, look, it's not just in the home, but even when you go into an organization or any entity, whether it's through even our schooling or what do you call it, our school curricula. I think once we introduce that there right from the beginning, we can carry that through, you know, a certain number of generations. Nana. So this is what I feel, but I don't know. Anyone has a dissenting view, I'm happy to hear, Nana.
No, I think that's a really important point. And you know, like this topic. It's a really good one in terms of, you know, we talk about Agile in Africa, we talk about Scrum, which is an Agile practice, and Kanban, you know, and my thing is that, you know, how do we, if it's so good, and if it's so helpful, and if it's really useful, how do we bring the power of Scrum to the masses? How do we bring it to leadership? How do we bring it into the system? How do we make this stuff really, like, you know, resonate with people? So I like what you're saying. I really like what you're saying. Education is quite key. And to bring it into the, I mean, it's like, it's so bizarre, right? Yeah, that something that is so important and so useful that we, you know, we don't have to convince people, right? It should be something that we're able to bring in. We don't need to convince people, you know? Okay, let me ping Martin the link. I don't know, Kofi, what do you think? I mean, it's like, you know, it's kind of a challenge, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a challenge, but welcome to the challenge. Some people thrive in you know, on some of these challenges, and so your ability to go around such challenges. And I recall one of my mentors who, you know, we work with, who recently conquered, you know, what do you call it, mountain Kilimanjaro, right? Was saying, look, the only way to conquer a challenge or go across a hurdle is to go around it. You know, you cannot go face to face or say I'm doing head on. The probability that you're going to lose out is or be defeated is really high. So we've got to go around it. And I like the point that, you know, Sam spoke to earlier around who else is in the room that you can leverage on in terms of the experience that they have, the knowledge that they have, right? I think that's one of the ways to go around it. And for us, even in our culture, again, sorry for going back to culture, because again, eventually is really on that,
it's
right?
Important.
Even in our cultural setting, right? And then let's go back to our extended, for want of a better word, lack of a better word, extended family. In you know, there's a certain wealth and experience that some grandpas and grandmas have, or uncles do have, that, you know, you probably don't know about, and you can go maybe 40 years, 50 years, and you will never discover that. So how do you cut back on such a journey or path? By learning from what they know and adding to what you know, so that, you know, you can scale and be the best that you can. And then again, bring that value back to the family and say, hey, look, this is someone who's done this, and because they did it, I can do it. So that's how I think we could go around that challenge. Yeah.
It's really been on my mind for some time that, are we doing Agile and Scrum because the world is making noise about Agile and Scrum? And looking at our culture, looking at our environment, can we find examples of Agile and Scrum in our own environment? Because when we talk about Agile and Scrum, we talk about the principles and the values, yeah? And when I look to the culture in Africa, you mentioned culture a few times today.
Yeah.
When I look at the culture in Africa and go to the proverbs and the parables, I can find lots of examples of agility and Agile. Imagine those people carrying the stuff on their heads every day and running after the cars in the traffic, yeah? Now, with no social security to pay their rent and to give them accommodation or to give them money when they are unemployed, with no social security, these guys who carry stuff on their heads and run around looking for people to buy their stuff in traffic. Sometimes you even get women carrying, you know, like heavy stuff on their heads and a baby on the back, yeah, and walking through traffic. Now, I keep saying to people that I train and coach in Europe, America, different places, I keep saying to them, if that's not agility, then what else is? Imagine if those people are given a little bit of Scrum or a little bit of, you know, NLP or something interesting that can help them, they can grow those businesses, yeah? Zuchi says the mindset is the answer to applying the Agile principles and values. Is one of the hardest things to do. You're asking people to throw away what they know and work differently. The big bosses are shaking in their boots with fear at the thought of empowering their staff members. Command and control is the culture of most organizations in Zimbabwe. Look at that. And it's not, Zuchi is not only in Zimbabwe, it's the same in Ghana.
Yeah, it's across. Exactly.
It's across the developing countries. and even in some of the so-called developed countries, it's across the world we find command and control. Even in Britain, in America, command and control is still very much part of the culture. And over here in Africa, this mindset thing and the cultural thing, one way of looking at this as well is looking for examples in the African culture, the proverbs and the parables, the principles and the values which carried Africa for millions of years, through thousands of years of great civilizations, from the Garden of Eden right through to the modern day today. All of those things that we did demonstrates agility. And perhaps we need to be looking at mapping the Agile principles and the Scrum values to aspects of our culture, which speaks to agility. Maybe that's one way of translating the Agile or Scrum or Kanban practices into the traditional setting in Africa. Because I'm currently using Scrum and a bit of Kanban on the farm in Equiapim in the eastern region of Ghana, where the traditional healers, the farmers, are doing using the Kanban board in Trello, and we are having, we're having daily Scrum. we're doing planning. So the question is, it's working, and guess what? I never had to mention once that this is something that was brought in from America. I just said to them, oh, we're coming to do something called Scrum, and we're coming to do planning, and we're coming to do daily Scrum, and we're coming, and it can't be more than 9 or 10 people, and we're coming to do a review of what we've planned and what we've achieved at the end of the time box that we give ourselves, whether it's 2 weeks or every month, and we're coming to do a reflection. And they said, oh, that's nice, and we just started doing it. So it's really trying to understand, because there's some level of agility in the African culture. Maybe we can leverage on that as well. When you look at the Adinkra symbols, you look at Sankofa, go back and fetch what's yours and bring back to help you today. That's like doing a retrospective, right? Oh,
you're right. You're right, Nana. So powerful, yeah.
Oh, hang on, Martin is struggling. Yeah, it's like I keep thinking about like Adinkrahini, leadership and charisma. There's all these interesting symbols and parables and proverbs that keep speaking to me about Scrum and about Agile. Sam, are you back for a couple of questions or for a minute? Or you're still, I'm sure he's in some meeting and he's just online.
No, I'm back.
Oh, okay. I asked a question, Sam, that all of this stuff it's all great, yeah, and the Scrum and Agile, and people on this call are trying to get their heads into what is Scrum, what is Kanban, what are all these wonderful Agile things. How can we do more with less? Sam, and Kofi's giving some really good answers as well. How do we take Scrum and these other Agile practices and translate them into the African context and allow people locally to understand that this is not alien to our culture? This is it's not just a foreign importation, that there are elements of Agile, even in the Yoruba tradition, right? You got parables and proverbs that speak to agility, the hunter, or to Shango or something. There's elements of agility and Agile and Ogun, the god of war, and something. There's all of these, different elements in our culture. How do we translate these things into the mainstream system? But also, how do we show in our culture that Agile or agility is not something that is totally alien to us?
To be honest, let me just try to answer that question, which is, I think if you look at the communities, I mean, I didn't live in the village, but I know in the village, people generally, when you talk about the community, is everybody working towards the common goal. So when they go to the farm, they went together, they helped each other, supported each other. In fact, in my culture, they say the community brings up a child, which is if your child is misbehaving, your neighbor is able to correct them. So in my mind, that is teamwork, which is where we have a common goal of wanting to achieve something. Right, someone's farm is flooded. We all go in there and help that person. No one, and that's self-organization. There is no one trying to help each other. I think with civilization, with money from exporting the resources, people now starting to crave power, now brought in hierarchy and competition. I don't want to deal with you. And I think that's the challenge. So if we were able to go back to before civilization, when we worked in the villages, how did the community run? How did they get things done? How did they organize themselves and train and reflect that way? I think then we're getting back to what we call Agile today. That's why I see.
Now that's also another interesting take on this. But I'd like to also add something very quickly there. When you say before civilization, civilization actually started in Africa.
Yes. I mean, I don't know.
Before you mean before modern Western civilization?
Modern Western, yes. That's what you described it. You know what I mean?
I'm just being naughty because I want our audience to make sure they don't leave and think that we, before civilization. So,
because I think the hierarchy, for me, hierarchy is one of the things that are affecting us, and we don't want to collaborate. And those are the things that go against, the ethos of trying to be agile. Personally, honestly, I don't care about Scrum or not. I tend to look at the essence of what is it.
Absolutely.
We come together.
Yes. Now you are you're making me get really, really, really excited. Yeah, it's the principles and values. I mean, it's here. Yeah, it's in your heart. Yeah. Guys.